So on the last term we were talking about globalization. We were talking about globalization and we started with political and cultural globalization. Right? Where we discussed lots of things about globalization and culture. There is a very interesting study you should read. There is this another anthropologist from Austria. His name is Professor Hofstede. Georg Hofstede. Hofstede actually has done a very longitudinal research. He studied some companies for years. It was a very long term. I think it went on for 3-4 years. And he keeps on improving the research. He did his research on international culture. He studied globalization and he's written a very wonderful book called Culture, the Software of Mind. That's a very interesting book. If you find somewhere, you should read it. अगर आपके library में या कहीं पे मिले. Where it looks at international culture in a very different perspective. For example, he says that instead of looking at countries having cultures, let us look at some dimensions of culture which are prevalent everywhere. So it doesn't mean that there is a dimension which is in India is not there in US. He says only the degree varies. So again, that's another topic I'll not discuss here, but it's an interesting thing. He has a website. You can go to, I think it's called hofstede.com or something. So initially he talked about 4 dimensions of culture. Later on he added on 2 more dimensions of culture. So it gives a very interesting view. Right? So that is one thing I remembered. I forgot to mention last time. So this is what you can do. Okay. Now coming to the globalization in the sense of economics or economic globalization. We talked about political and cultural. So let's look at economic globalization. There have been a lot of studies, a lot of researchers and many people have done it. So there is this very famous economist, I'm sure you've heard of, Stiglitz, Joseph Stiglitz. He wrote a book on globalization. I'm forgetting the complete name of the book, but he has written a very interesting book on globalization where he talked about actually his premise is, it's a kind of a quote also people use for Stiglitz. He says that we should look for global governance without global government. Global governance without global government. That's a very famous quote from the book. So he talked about some of the elements of globalization, economic globalization. So let's look at his framework of economic globalization. So fundamentally, first of all, it is foreign investment, foreign investments. So let's note down and then we'll take these up. International trade, movement of labor, technology, and lastly, the movement of, or rather, opening up of capital markets. This is Stiglitz framework. There are other frameworks also available. So some of these things are very common with others. Like that day we talked about the 5 escapes from Appadurai, where you can see technoscapes and finance escapes and so on. So some things, I mean, people have given different names, but these are very common. Foreign investment, free flow of foreigners. In fact, this is also one of the things that WTO requires, that there should be a free flow of capital from one place to another, from one country to another. Now, foreign investments have been the need of the hour by many developing nations, including India. We all know that it helps in improving of balance of payments situations. Also, it gives a boost to domestic industries. Yes, please. So, both whether it is institutional investments or direct investments, FDIs and FIIs, very well about these terms. So, this is one of the most important elements of globalization. So globalization in the sense of foreign investments. Then international trade. So once again, there should be no trade restrictions. In other sense, we should be removing barriers of trade. I'm sure in your PG somewhere you must have read, barriers to trade. 2 types of barriers, tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers, right? So there is a saying that non-tariff barriers are invisible barriers, while tariff barriers are visible barriers. And tariff barriers, again, all the signatories to WTO, they have to remove the tariff barriers. वो तो करना ही है, right? Because these are visible. If there is a tariff barrier, then somebody can complain in WTO, their grievance redressal mechanism, that some country is, inhibiting through taxes or custom or import duties, etc. On the other hand, NTBs are invisible because every country is a sovereign country and they have a right to protect. For example, because of pandemic, there are travel restrictions. Now, even though now the pandemic situation has eased out, many countries are still following it. Right? It could be due to real threat, pandemic is still there, or it could be due to some other vested interests. But again, nobody can complain about it because every country has a right to protect its citizen. पहले भी ऐसा हुआ है, वो कभी वो बर्ड फ्लू आया है तो वो मीट का इंपोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट बंद कर दिया गया, और वो काफी दिनों तक बंद रहा इन स्पाइट ऑफ कि वो प्रॉब्लम खत्म हो गई, लेकिन बिकॉज हेल्थ इज अ कंसर्न. So there may be some major issues like this, or there can be even minor issues. Minor issues. For example, product specifications, product testing. So some countries can have a very stringent product testing norms. जैसे हमारे यहाँ अभी स्कूल्स में डिसेक्शन बंद करा दिया गया. अगर आप लोगों ने बायोलॉजी पढ़ी हो तो मैंने तो डिसेक्शन किया हुआ है इन क्लास 9th and 10th, frogs and others. बट पिछले कुछ सालों से डिसेक्शन इज because animal cruelty and all those things are there. In the same way, product testing is one area where there is a lot of controversy. Some of the, for example, cosmetic manufacturers, Revlon के ऊपर एक बार ये ban लगा हुआ था because it was found that they have tested a particular variant of mascara on some African monkeys, and the monkeys became blind because of that testing. So how should product testing be done? In case of pharmaceutical industry, the guidelines are very clear, right? Human trials will only come after previous phases have been in, and that is why it takes any medicine 7 to 10 years before they are finally launched in the market. So lab trials and animal trials, and then followed by human trials, and that too in several phases with all this recording of data and sharing of data. In fact, that is one of the controversies related to these COVID vaccines, that data has not been published, or sufficient research data is not available about. So I think the scientists better know, but this controversy is because of this only. So product testing is something, for example, a country can simply say that we will not import any products which have been tested on animals. And that would in one go stop many products from entering. Right. So a very small thing leading to a big issue. In 1990s there was an issue in Germany. I know this because I was with one of the companies working at that time. When Germany banned a particular chemical, our company was in home furnishings business, so upholstery and carpets and all those. So the dyes that were used, there is a particular kind of chemical which we call the azo-based dyes, which actually bring the luster in the colors, you know, red, so bright red, so lustrous colors are there. So in Germany they banned a particular dye, in fact all azo-based dyes, and the ships, many of the ships were actually in transit, and because of the bans, many of the Indian companies actually became bankrupt. The small exporters from eastern UP and some in Haryana. उस समय और ये laws भी नहीं थे. For example, अब तो RBI has given some restrictions about, you know, export. But उस समय इतना नहीं था. So some people who exported, their ships were in transit. The cost of bringing the product back would be more expensive, so they dumped it. Yes. Some of them dumped in the sea because they could not bring it back. And some of them tried to find alternate markets nearby, and they had to somehow sell it. So it was a huge loss for many companies. But again, nobody could say anything about it because Germany had their own, nobody can complain that they are trying to protect their citizen. Because azo-based dyes, there was a research that found that it is carcinogenic. So it may lead to some kind of a cancer. So these things are there. Even in the US, during 90s, they tried to stop many of the Indian products, not just Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi and all, because they claim that we use child labor. So they say that, okay, we are not going to import any product that uses child labor. So you can see that all these are not tariff barriers, but non-tariff, so some small thing or even a major thing, but every country is a sovereign country, so they have complete rights over protection of human rights or their citizens. So international trade, barring those NTBs, again the thing is identifying the non-tariff barriers and trying to remove any anomalies in it. For example, an issue related to public health, उसमें हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते, वो मानना ही पड़ेगा. हम ये नहीं कह सकते कि हमारे हम हाइजीन का हमें ज़्यादा ख्याल नहीं है, तो why are they so much worried about it? That we cannot say. Same is about child labor. It is an issue, so we need to solve it. On the other hand, there may be trivial things, which can be easily sorted out. For example, if you are having a left-hand driven vehicle and some country has a right-hand driven vehicle, then minor adjustments can be made. Similarly, sockets, you have a pin socket and a US flat sockets and all those, again, minor adjustments can be there. So these things can be sorted out. Again, free flow of international trade, and that is what WTO is asking everyone, every members. That will also lead to it. Then movement of labor. This again is a controversial issue. In fact, WTO जब भी आप लोग पढ़ेंगे, again we are not going to discuss WTO here, but you should read something about the Singapore issues. Singapore वाला जो उनका summit था, so there were a few issues raised. One of the issues was related to labor. Please come. Labor. Similarly, in Doha round, again you can read about it. Lots of things are being talked about. Movement of labor will lead to problems. For example, many countries which want to, for example, somebody can say that if we ease the visa policies, maybe terrorists can enter, right? अगर हम उसको आसान कर दे तो टेररिस्ट आ जाएंगे. यूएस में अभी आपने देखा होगा. Then protecting or giving employment to local people. हम बाहर से क्यों ले, हमारे अपने यहाँ unemployment बढ़ रहा है, so why should we let? That's what we are saying. People from Bangladesh are coming to India and taking away jobs of Indians and so on. In the US, it was a major poll issue when Mr. Trump won the election. All those issues related to H-1B visas and spousal visas, they were cancelled. Abhi bhi, the current administration is trying to remove, but that problem is there, right? Then Mexico wall and all those things. So you can see it's a very controversial issue. Once again, movement of labor, although it is ideal, and we have seen it happening with European Union, where people can move across different countries and find jobs anywhere. But बाकी parts of the world में थोड़ा सा भी मुश्किल है, right? So, but like we were discussing the other day, increasingly we are seeing that more and more people from different parts of the world are working in companies. Like I gave you the example of Tata Motors, where the CEO has been a foreigner, a British person once. And so is the case with many other. In fact, Reliance Digital CEO is also European. The CEO of Reliance Digital is also somebody from Europe. I don't remember his name, but you can check. So, movement of labor being controversial still, but we are seeing lots of ease. Movement of technology, this is transfer of technology is another controversial issue because of the patents, first of all. And like I was saying the other day, two points of views are there. One point of view says that things should be available freely for all. Why should there be restrictions? The other says that. So this is a controversy, or rather a dilemma in front of many thinking people. So whether exclusive rights, plagiarism, for example, हम लोग बहुत बातें करते हैं plagiarism पे. So you're not supposed to copy somebody's work, right? In the same way, patents also were, copyright issues also there. So copying something is one thing, but then taking help from something, for example, a technology which might help save a lot of people's lives. This again is a dilemma in front of many people. Like sometimes in my PG class, I give this example that, suppose there is a scientist who finds a cure for cancer, a pill that can cure cancer, 100%. And the scientist has spent, let's say, 3-4 decades of his life on researching on this, and in the end he has become successful. Now he says, okay, I'll give my formula to somebody or any company for, let's say, $10 billion. Anybody who gives me $10 billion can get it. Now the problem is, any company that pays $10 billion would like to recover it. That would make eventually the cost of the medicine very, very high, out of the reach of most poor people. Then somebody can argue that, okay, the scientist is working for humanity, so for the human sake of fellow human beings, he should give it for free. और वो साइंटिस्ट कहता है मैंने तो अपने लाइफ के 4 टिकट लगा दिए, I want this. Otherwise, so there's a kind of a dilemma, right? On one hand, we say no, patent has to be there, and the scientist, it's his intellectual property, so he can decide what can be the price. On the other hand, somebody would say that he should sacrifice. So sacrifice versus some individualistic notion of this is my right. And if you think deeply about it, it will go to other philosophical dilemmas. Individualism versus collectivism. In terms of politics and economy, it will be communism versus capitalism, right? A thoroughly capitalist idea would be that the person has a right to ask for whatever. Only he can set the price. On the other hand, cooperation versus competition, that famous philosophy behind आप लोगों ने अगर सॉफ्टवेयर यूज किया है ना, वो ओपन सोर्स और licensed, right? So people are forced to get pirated ones. Ubuntu, आप लोगों ने सुना है इसका नाम? So actually it's an African word. There is a story behind it that some kids were asked to race to the top of a mountain, and there would be a basket of fruits. So instead of racing, they all went there together and they shared the fruits. So that's the African folk story about this. So again, competition versus cooperation. If you cooperate, everybody shares. So these are political, economic, and other kinds of ideas. But you can see all these somehow meet somewhere. So, but the fact is, we are in a patent regime. Like I said, India has opted for now a product patent regime, and we are in a product patent regime, and all over the world we are following the same regime, and therefore respecting patents and copyrights and intellectual property rights is something that has to be there, which at times prevents free flow of technology. So transfer of technology becomes a bit difficult at that time. Even for transfer of technology, there may be many issues. For example, a government can worry that if a new technology comes, it will lead to unemployment. A lot of people say that technology की वजह से वो 10 लोगों का काम एक मशीन कर लेगी, so it might lead to unemployment. So that can be a thing. Or the government would say we want to protect domestic industries. हमारी domestic industries अभी इतनी capable नहीं है कि वो MNC की technology को match कर सकें. So it will eat up some of the domestic industries. So that kind of a argument can also be given. Also, the government may find that cost of transferring the technology is very high. Not just the social cost, but also the financial cost, the economic cost. So many things can be there. Some technologies are said to be disruptive, disruptive technologies, which can actually disrupt something that is till now smoothly going. So, but as we discussed the other day, this is another thing that is very important for globalization and capital markets. Once again, opening up of capital markets for institutional investors. Here we are talking about more direct investments. Here we are more talking about institutional investment. So big funds and banks, other institutional investors investing in mutual funds and pension funds and so on and so forth. So that again may lead to better financial situations of a country, and that is again another point about globalization. The same, not the same, but similar kind of framework has been given by many other authors. For example, the 5 M's, जो उन्होंने पढ़ा हुआ है ना, 5 M's, men, machine, money, methods. कहीं पे किसी किताब में 6 M's भी लिखा है. So the 6th M is the market. और किसी जगह में देखा था 7 M's भी हैं. So let's not get confused about the number of M's. There is an interesting story about this. Once there was a professor who talked about, in marketing we talk about 4 P's, right? अगर आप लोगों ने कभी सुना होगा. So then in some book, in fact Philip Kotler talked about 6 P's, but not very seriously. He said we can add 2 more P's like politics and power and politics. So that makes it 6 P's. Then somebody for service marketing says it's a 7 P's, right? So I met this professor who said I was recently in a conference where they talked about 14 P's. So I told him, okay, give me any word starting with P, I'll connect it with marketing, right? So, and actually it is possible. You can find a word and somehow connect it. So I always tell my students, let us stick to the 4 P's. Forget about any other P's. Similarly about M's, they can be 5, 6, 7, whatever. Basically there are 6. Baki to you can keep on increasing, think of more terms. And so anyway, so the 5 M's that we already know, men, that is for flow of labor, right? Human resources. Similarly, machine, that is capital goods, import and export of capital goods needed for production of other things. Money through FDI and FIA, again it's been covered here, right? Methods, again transfer of technology or movement of technology, the know-how, etc. have been covered here. Diffusion of technology, that is what we talk about. If a technology has been invented at one place in a country, how does the technology spread over, diffuse over the rest of the world? You see, the market economy would want the technology to spread. If a technology is there in a small country, फिर उसका कोई फायदा नहीं है, unless you have to find a market to sell it. And you cannot keep on producing at one place and marketing it everywhere. You need to have more production hubs. China has become a big production hub over the years for many countries, for many companies, sorry. So most of the American companies are getting their things produced in China and Bangladesh and Vietnam and so on. So having that would mean that you are in a way diffusing the technology. It's reaching everywhere. Also, more and more countries will be spending more money on R&D, increasingly more money. India somehow ranks very low in terms of our expenditure on R&D. We don't spend as much. You can produce in bulk, but we don't spend as much on R&D. But many other companies spend billions of dollars. One of the cars from Hyundai, when they launched Accent way back in 2004 or 3, they called it a $1 billion car because they spent $1 billion in R&D for that car. Now, that was 15, 17 years back. I've not heard of an Indian brand or an Indian company investing that much amount of capital for R&D for a particular product or technology. Right? Tesla, if you look, Tesla has been spending so much money on R&D. Google has been spending so much money. They are even trying for the trials are on. For example, driverless cars. For the past 4 or 5 years, they are having trials. Moderately successful. Tesla even now talking about space travel and spacecraft, etc. So all these things require a lot of money, right? So expenditure on R&D will increase, and the moment the expenditure increases, it means that there will be a competition within technologies. For example, at one point of time, you can have 3 or 4 technology towards the same things, and eventually, maybe only one technology survives and rest will perish. Like in India, for example, you had mobile phones and pagers at the same time, right? Eventually, pagers perished and mobile phones stayed. They used more or less the same kind of a technology. Only in pager you had a mediator whom you could call and connect through. Right? So these are, and of course, the fifth theme, that is material, that is about raw material, etc. So more concepts of, for example, value addition. Raw material, having just some raw material at home, like some minerals or something which can be exported without any value addition, does not mean much for the country exporting it. This is one of the things how, in fact, Dadabhai Nauroji has written an article about this, where he said that this is how the British drained the wealth. ये मुझे आर्टिकल का नाम नहीं याद आ रहा है, 1901 में पब्लिश हुआ था. आप सर्च कर लीजिएगा, इट्स अवेलेबल ऑनलाइन, या मेरे पास होगा तो मैं आपको उसका लिंक दे दूंगा या प्रिंट आउट दे दूंगा. So where he actually studied with data how the British drained the wealth, taking out raw material at a cheaper price and exporting back finished products at a more expensive price. So that also is there. Every country now would want to add some value into raw material and only then export. You know, there is an interesting concept of a banana republic. You must have heard the name of this term, banana republic. Any idea what it means? What is a banana? Not the brand. Banana Republic is a garment brand. So I'm not talking about that. Yes, sir.
So a country that has an economy in shambles, that is not economically viable, or it is having.
Actually, the term was coined late 19th, early 20th century. Keeping in mind actually the bananas. There were some small countries whose only production was bananas. In Caribbean, in Mauritius, some of the African countries. The only resource that they had was export of bananas. Okay. So now, of course, they have developed as tourist destinations, etc. So where you have the economy based on a single product or maybe just a couple of products, that would be, in a sense, banana republic. So, in other words, there is no value addition as such. You know, we are producing bananas and simply putting it on ship and exporting it. So unless we do something, for example, you can have a processing unit which can pack bananas so that their shelf life increases, right? If you're exporting it in shipping containers which are there for a month or 15 days, then you need something to increase the shelf life. So obviously, so that means that more and more countries are now doing it. Another thing, again, not related to here, but related to what we are discussing. There is a book written by an Indian professor, C.K. Prahlad, and his US partner, Gary Hamel. Gary Hamel and C.K. Prahlad. They talked about competitive advantage of nations. And Michael Porter has given a 5-factor theory about it. Again, we're not concerned with that here. So one of the factors in Michael Porter's thing, and one of the things that Hamel and Prahlad talk about, that every country needs to specialize in something, you know, and keep on researching about it, so that you are always ahead of the rest of the world. And he took example from not just from industrialized country like Japan, where they are researching about electronics and all those things. He talked about a country like Netherlands, Holland or Netherlands. If you close your eyes, you think about Holland or Netherlands, what comes to your mind?
Clean country.
हॉलैंड और नीदरलैंड के बारे में जब हम सोचते हैं तो हमारे मन में क्या आता है?
Tulip gardens.
Tulips, right? New Zealand, Holland is known for tulips and windmills. Windmills and tulips, primarily. वैसे तो बहुत चीजें टनल्स हैं वहाँ पे वो all those things are there. So the country has invested so much on R&D and transportation and increasing the tulips, for example, are exported all over the world because they produce. It's a small, tiny country in Europe, but they were specialized. You know, they are coming up with more colors, for example. If you look at even at a satellite picture of a tulip farm, you would find that it's very, very colorful. Same as with their windmills. Windmills have been there for centuries. Now they are using it even for many other purposes, including, of course, energy generation. And they keep on doing it. So some of the largest companies, you know, where they produce electricity with windmills, come from Holland. So continuous. So similarly, every country will try to, you know, invest some money in R&D. So nobody will have an exclusive right forever. आज हमने कुछ इन्वेंट किया, maybe कुछ साल बाद कोई और उसको करने लगेगा. So there will be no exclusive right forever, and that is why it will be inevitable that technology is transferred. अगर बहुत सालों तक आप ट्रांसफर नहीं करेंगे तो it will be replaced by some other technology. Then again a country's R&D expenditure might go in waste. So and of course the sixth M, that was the markets. Market need to be opened and free flow of goods across countries. किसी भी country का product कहीं भी बिक जाए. That again relates to international trade here, where we are talking about flow of goods. Okay. And there have been a lot of criticism of globalization by many people. That day we talked about some of the cultural objections, like languages will be lost, cultural issues will be there. We will become homogenized. You know, that's a real threat, that we will become homogenized culturally, right? Apart from it, there are some other issues, even economic issues people talk about. For example, people say that the big MNCs will dominate local small industries. That's one threat that people feel in globalization. That if we allow every country to come and free flow of trade, free market, then it might hamper local industry. We can discuss whether it is true or not, but this is one of the factors people say against concept of globalization. Then the protectionist policies of governments. There is a concept of protectionism. So governments do not want foreign companies. Some governments do not want foreign companies to come, and they provide several reasons for it. One of the reasons is, like I said, unemployment. वो बाहर की कंपनी आएगी तो लोकल लोगों का रोजगार खत्म हो जाएगा. That is a common thing. Similarly, it will hamper the growth of small-scale industries, etc. That is another thing. It will drain away the foreign exchange from India, because if you come from a country, because if a company comes from abroad, they will take away the profits. You know, so that will drain some of the wealth, and so on. So these are some of the arguments given by governments, that this is why we are protecting. So we are doing everything to protect our people and protect our businesses, etc. We can discuss whether these things are true, and if true, to what extent true. For example, the first one about loss of employment. Right. आप लोगों को लगता है कि लॉस ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट होता है या हुआ है? इफ एन MNC कम्स,
सर एम्प्लॉयमेंट तो बिल्कुल मिलेगा अगर आती है तो बाकी हैवी लोगों को।
तो क्या ऐसा होता है या ऐसा हुआ है हमारे यहाँ, हमारे एक्सपीरियंस में कि एम्प्लॉयमेंट का लॉस हुआ है या हो सकता है? Has it happened? Otherwise, the argument is very solid. Somebody says कि वो बाहर की कंपनी से हमारे यहाँ का एम्प्लॉयमेंट कम हो जाएगा.
If it
The
results
physical
in the
labor
shutdown
loss.
of domestic industries,
Sorry?
if it results in the shutting down of domestic companies,
Okay.
it can create loss of employment.
Has it happened so far?
Yes, sir.
In case of handicrafts companies, handicrafts
Okay.
in pre-independence time.
So, has that loss happened in your experience? Yeah, हमारे यहाँ ऐसा हुआ है.
My experience, but we have seen.
It may happen. That's what I'm saying. This is one of the arguments कि ऐसा हो सकता है कि हमारी इंडिजिनस इंडस्ट्रीज खत्म हो जाएं या इवन हमारे आर्टिस्टिक जो एक कुछ ट्रेडिशनल जो हैंडीक्राफ्ट या इस तरह की चीज़ें वो ख़त्म हो जाएं. लाइक वो बड़ी बड़ी गारमेंट फैक्ट्रीज हैं तो उससे लोकल लेवल पे जो एम्ब्रॉयडरी और ये वाला काम है उस पर असर पड़ेगा.
One of the examples is jute.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Khadi is also an example.
Like Chinese toys, etc. have captured
Right.
the market.
So has it resulted in an absolute loss of employment?
Not absolute.
So again, the idea is for new kind of companies, we might be needing new kinds of skills, and that will create job opportunities elsewhere. People might shift. आप तो ये भी कह सकते हैं ना कि वो डीजल और पेट्रोल व्हीकल पे रोक लगा दी तो बहुत से ड्राइवर्स और ऑटो ड्राइवर्स उनका जॉब लॉस हो गया, राइट? बट दे मे बी फोर्स टू गो टू some other alternate job. Now, I'm not talking about ethicality, whether it is ethical or unethical. I'm talking about whether there has been a loss or whether there has been a significant loss. This is still debatable. We can see, yes, in some cases, जैसा आप लोगों ने example दिया वहाँ पे loss शायद हुआ है. Maybe somebody can conduct a research on that to find out the impact on employment. Find more data about employment loss with something. Similarly, drain of wealth from the country. इंडिया में तो ये भी बहुत से लोग कहते थे ना कि वो जैसे ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी आई थी एक बार और दे कैप्चर्ड, उसी तरह से MNCs आएंगे तो फिर से टेक अवे. So has it happened or is it happening or is there a real fear of that? Drainage of wealth or all this, is there a real fear? The thing is, for example, this drain of wealth. Now there are these policies in FDI. Whenever a company is coming, they have to fulfill certain obligations. There are some export obligations. So, for example, if a foreign company, nobody can take away money from here. We do not have a 100% convertible currency. ऐसे नहीं है ना कि आप रुपए लेके जाइए और कन्वर्ट करके चले जाइए बाहर. It's not 100%. It is convertible, but not 100%. There are restrictions. So to say that any company will be able to take it away is probably not an educated answer, right? On the other hand, there are these companies which need to import something in order to manufacture. A prime example is Coke and Pepsi. Coke and Pepsi का जो concentrate आता है, they have to import because of the trade secret. The concentrate is a trade secret, so they import it. In return, they have to fulfill some export obligation. So it's not that they are only importing and not exporting. Pepsi and Coke both export many products to nearby countries. In Singapore, there is no bottling plant. They all come from Malaysia and India and Sri Lanka, etc. So Indian companies have to fulfill certain obligations. So once again, that is not true that wealth drain हो जाएगा and so on. There is another criticism which again might be debated, but it has some ground, and it is that developing and underdeveloped countries, in order to win foreign investment, might dilute policies and might dilute human rights issues and other environmental laws, because we want foreign investment. So a foreign country may want that you should dilute your labor laws. We don't want labor unions working in a factory. Now that's a real concern. It is happening in many countries. Bangladesh का मैंने आपको example last time बताया था, जहाँ पे कि labor rights were not practiced. There were no best practices adopted for labor law. Same was with Pakistan. Even in India, in some parts, they say, although legally it's not there, but somehow they are being able to, because the companies don't care. They are franchising their operations and they want the local people to work as per them. So in Pakistan, in fact, there is a very popular Harvard Business School case study about Nike in Pakistan. Again, you can see where somebody came from Nike headquarters to their factories in Karachi or Lahore, and they found a lot of child labor working there. Now they had these ethical issues, because in the US, according to US laws, it is not permissible, but according to local laws, it was permissible. So what should they do? That was the case question, right? So you can see that these issues are real. Environmental even. To establish a factory, you need to cut trees, you need to, or for example, the local ecological balance might be disturbed. So whether a country wants to dilute the laws in order to accommodate foreign companies, this is a real problem. This is happening almost everywhere in developing countries. In India also we have seen it. And then one of the biggest criticism has been about the concept of mainstream and non-mainstream. People from developed nations say that we want to bring developing countries into the mainstream. Similarly, so again, this whole concept of what is development and what is the idea of development seen from the perspective of a developed countries, and what is the idea of development seen from the perspective of a underdeveloped or developing country. So how do we look at it? What is mainstream? Again, the same thing, global versus local. So is global the mainstream and local has to join this mainstream, or global has to come down to the local to, instead of talking about a mainstream, can we talk about several streams, the branches of the tree and so on? Can we have that concept? So this again, mainstream economy can be there. You can talk about mainstream economy. You can talk about market economy. Market will take care of everything. Don't worry, अभी आपका थोड़ा सा धीमा चल रहा है, but because you have joined the mainstream of economics, then in the long run things will be all right. So as you know, the famous economist Keynes said that in the long run we are all dead. Right. So we need to know how long, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year, what is the extent of the long run, right? So when we say that market economy will take care of itself in the long run, we don't specify the long run. So that's a real problem, not just in terms of economy, but political integration or cultural integration everywhere. How do we decide somebody not wearing a particular type of clothes is backward, or कोई गंवार है या कोई urban है? Is it necessarily bad? Those questions are there. We keep thinking on those terms on a day-to-day basis. All right. Okay. So this was all about globalization. Now let us start with the other two from the LPG, LNP, that is liberalization and privatization. Again, I will not give you a great deal of inputs on that. Rather, I would ask you to read something more about it. One of the primary thing was that speech by Dr. Manmohan Singh that you need to read. This will open up, and then I talked about that Dr. Jagdish Bhagwati's article. That's another starting point if you want to know more about this. So let's look at the Indian experience in liberalization. The liberalization in India started when we talk about 1991. It started around the same time when many other countries which were facing similar problems were adopting it. And one primary stepping point is the example of Russia. When Mr. Gorbachev became the president, he said that we are going to adopt democratic model and we are going to liberalize the economy. He used two terms. I'm sure you have heard this. Perestroika and glasnost. Loosely translating, these are Russian words. Something like openness and being liberal. मिलेगा आपको ये इसके बारे में information. So along the same line, India was also experimenting with our own liberalization, privatization, etc. Some of the key takeaway from Dr. Manmohan Singh's speech is his one-liner quotes, and one of the quotes is, "Private sector can no more be a holy cow." This is what he said. Public sector can no more be a holy cow. So this was his view about public sector before he proposed disinvestment. So we'll discuss some of these things. Right? So let us look at what happened before liberalization. After independence, a number of things were there. As far as the industrial policy, etc. was concerned, we were still having those, you can call it a colonial hangover. We were just newly independent, and many of the British policies related to many things were still operable, mainly exploitative. You know, the labor rights were not as good. So this colonial hangover was there at the time of the independence. After independence, our leaders who were influenced by the Russian model of development. The Prime Minister, Mr. Nehru, and many of his colleagues in the government, they were influenced by the Russian model of development. I think I told you last time also. That's why we had many of the major projects supported by the Russians, etc. So, but we were not communist. We became what we call a socialist. We are a socialist. Yesterday was the Constitution Day where everyone read the preamble. So we are, even in preamble it is written that we are a socialist country, right? So it was a very idealist notion. Socialist, equality, etc. These are idealist notions. So that was something that initiated our economy. We started with our own economic planning, etc., based on the socialistic beliefs, you know, bringing in more people, alleviating poverty, etc., etc. So protectionism that we just discussed had to be a part of the government policy because we had small industries, cottage industries, we needed to protect them. We could not afford at that time to bring in many foreign companies, etc. So there was a lot of protectionism that the government envisaged. And the focus was more on import substitution. We used to import lots of things, but now we wanted to manufacture those things home. So we wanted to substitute imports. And therefore, the focus was industrialization under the government patronship. Government patronized the industrialization. So it was the government that was coming up with PSUs and large factories, and so government was doing. One of the reasons was that there was hardly any private sector big enough to undertake those huge projects, which required so much of investment. Also, government was able to take loans from World Bank, etc., for infrastructure projects, which none of the private sector at that time was capable of. So that was there, and so industrialization was mostly state regulated and state sponsored. Then we adopted the concept of centralized planning. Centralized plan. This again, we had a planning commission and 5-year plans, etc. Now we have Niti Aayog. So how different Niti Aayog is from World Planning Commission, and all those things are still being studied. Then one of the criticisms of pre-liberalization was that we were having what we call a license Raj, or license Raj, or red tapeism. A lot of red tapeism was there. So for every small thing we needed license, which was actually very, very anti-business activity, anti-industrialization. So it actually discouraged private people to take up entrepreneurship and start things on their own. So that was there. So basically it was a state, that is the government, intervening a great extent in the economy and industries. So naturally liberalization would mean that government will gradually get away from control and would give private sector more control. So that is how it would go. All right. Some of the reforms, even before 1991, there were a couple of times where government went for limited kind of reforms. The first such was in 1966, where again we had a lot of inflation, and the government exchequer was drained because of two wars, 62 China war and 65 Pakistan war. Then we had problems, there were drought in the country, and food grain issue was there, and there was an embargo by the US for supplying of food grains. So all these issues were there. So in 1966, for the first time, government tried to exercise some kind of liberalization. So they went on to take loans from World Bank and IMF. They took heavy loans in order to ease the BOP situation. The government exercised devaluation of currency at that time, once again to boost exports, etc. Once again about correction of BOP. And other export promotion measures were taken. For example, government implemented some of the policies for export promotion. For example, there was MDA, or Market Development Assistance, where exporters were given some subsidy to travel abroad and showcase their products in international exhibitions, etc. So similar policies were there, but it was only to a very limited extent, and but still it was good that it was thought for the first time. After that, it was a period of political turmoil, 71 war, then emergency and other issues were there. Then the new government in 1977, then again a midterm election in 1980, and so on. So the next round of liberalization started in 80s. Again at a limited level during the prime ministership of first with Mrs. Gandhi and later on with her son, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. Again in a very limited sense, where red tapeism was something that was, that the prime minister tried to address. He was not successful in that we all know. But limited liberalization was there. A quick background before that: in 1977, when the Janata Party government was there, again whatever compulsions were there, they regulated some of the things which were earlier deregulated. One instance is that of Coke. Coke was there in India till 1976-77, and in 77 they were asked to pack up. The reason was the government insisted that Coke should start manufacturing its concentrate in India. And the Coke people said that this is a trade secret. There is only one place where it is produced. It is guarded at Atlanta, and it cannot be. Nowhere in the world we have any production facility for that. So they refused, and eventually they had to leave. Right? Similarly, some of the companies were asked to do some tweak in their ownership patterns. They were asked to become more Indian. For example, Glaxo was there, so they had to have an Indian subsidiary which were given a majority stock, and so initially it became GSK, and there were a number of name changes were there. Same was with other companies, Sylvania, Lakshman, and so many companies. They were asked to change their ownership pattern and become more Indian in a sense. So keeping all this in mind, in 80s when we started with slightly opening up, for example, Pepsi came to India, Coke came in 90s, Pepsi came in India in 1987. They were allowed entry in 1984, but for 3 years they were preparing, for many kinds of supply chain issues. So these things happened, and again it was a very limited kind of opening up of economy. So this was the background before 1991. We talked about other backgrounds earlier. So this all led to this 1991 economic reforms. Once again, I will not give you all those details, but very quickly let's go through some of the things that happened. One was the area of fiscal reforms. The government income and expenditure had to be controlled. For tax reforms, the government constituted a committee under Raja Chelaiya. It's called the Raja Chelaiya Commission, which gave reports on the tax reforms. Some of them were accepted later on. Then there were some monetary and financial reforms. For example, the government reduced the SLR and CRR for the banks. So it was 37.5% earlier. Now it went down to 25%. So that was another thing that the government did. Interest rates were cut. This is what led to the boom in housing sector and auto sector and so on. So interest rates were made more consumer friendly. Then there were capital market reforms. SEBI was given teeth. SEBI became a statutory body. It was established in 1988, but it was not a statutory body. In 1992, it was given a statutory recognition, and it was given the control over stock markets in India. So there were these stock market reforms, capital market reforms. Then there were reforms in industrial policy. Again, we don't have to go into great details of it, you all know it, but again major thing was that the government schedules, schedule A, B and C that are there. A reserved for the government and C reserved for the private, and we had a mix of both. So a number of industries were shifted from A to B and B to C. So actually in the A list there were 17 industries that were reduced to 8. So that was what was done. And then ease of foreign investment. So new FDI and FII policies were launched. Once again, that led to lots of foreign companies coming to India. Then the privatization, that is the disinvestment of. I gave you the example of this quote: "Public sector can no more be a holy cow." What the government did at that time was that they identified some well-performing PSUs. उस समय उनको उन्होंने नवरत्ना नाम दिया था. बाद में मिनी रत्ना एंड महारत्ना ये सब आगे ऐड हुआ. But in 1991, 9 industries were identified and they were called Navratna. They were given more autonomy about salary structure and their operations. ये सारी चीजें थी. So these were things in a nutshell that happened in 1991. All right. So before I leave, I'll just make a couple of give you a couple of informations.